Okay. Well, good evening, everybody. I just wanted to take a little time to welcome everyone this evening to our discussion on life after COVID-19 and some of the things that we specifically want to talk about in regard to stress management and resiliency. I wanted to give an opportunity for myself and my co-facilitator, Krista Chambers, to introduce ourselves and then talk a little bit about expectations, content, and the flow of information and how we like to present. One of the things that we ask before we start is that everybody mute themselves and turn off their cameras. It just helps to save bandwidth and helps for you to have the highest level of content as the viewer. So again, welcome. My name is Kenna Grant, and I am a higher ed professional. I also teach locally at the University of Hartford in the Department of Psychology and University Studies. I'm also the Executive Director for Student Health and Wellbeing, and I have a background in crisis management, trauma response, and holistic health management. So I want to take this time to have Krista introduce herself if she's able to unmute and just say a little bit about herself, and then we'll get started on the content. You can't unmute yourself. Okay. Well, let's go back to, there you go, slides again. And I'll introduce Krista. All right, so my co-facilitator is going to be monitoring the chat and looking out for some questions. Krista M. Chambers is a special education professional within the Hartford Public School System here in Hartford, Connecticut. Her specialty is early childhood development and behavioral management. And Krista has over 20 years experience in education in a variety of roles, including adjunct professor at Goodwin College. All right, next slide. So I just want to talk a little bit about goals and course courtesies, what I like to call them. First and foremost, we're in a virtual classroom. So it's different. It's a little strange, and we may hear sounds or, children, pets, other people in our homes in the backgrounds, and that's totally fine. Krista and I's presentation style is casual and informative, and we want this workshop to be your time to absorb information, take notes, and then there'll be time at the end for some dialogue and discussion. We have an hour, which is a good amount of time, but also sometimes not enough time, depending on the topics we talk about. But some of the goals of the course are to gain an understanding of the impact of how stress impacts our life. So particularly in relation to COVID-19 and where we are now, particularly a year in. Reflect on our own experiences while gaining an understanding of others. Storytelling is very important, and also journaling your story is very important. We want to learn from each other as our own teachers. Understanding the concept of what mindfulness is and how to integrate mindfulness into your daily lives by some basic tools and concepts that we're going to cover over the next 6 weeks. Understanding a baseline definition of what trauma is in relation to the stress response and how it all connects to how we respond to stress and how resilient we are. So some of the things that we ask is that you are an active participant and in your home, that you have something to write with, a journal, pen, paper, you can take notes on your phone, a computer, whatever you're comfortable doing, take your own notes. Be respectful of others' views and life experiences is really important as a critical learner. Listen to understand. When you show up, be authentic. We will do the same. And we want to create a safe space to learn and also unlearn. The content that we're sharing over the next 6 weeks are rooted in psychological theory and development, human development, childhood development, and are accredited and resourced in terms of our own content and the work that we do on a daily basis. So that's kind of the overall goals. And again, I know it's weird being on a Zoom, and Chris and I both have taught Zoom, so we're okay with blank screens and it's fine. But if you want to actively engage in the chat, please feel free to do so as participants, and we'll do our best to answer those questions. Okay, so mindfulness and stress management. We want to go to the next slide. We want to start to introduce these concepts. So I guess I would ask to think about, stress has now become one of the main symptoms of most of the things that cause sickness in our lives. And stress is also a continuum. So when we think about particularly what's hot topic right now in relation to COVID-19 and how a global pandemic has impacted all of us, it's definitely caused stress to a certain degree or a varying degree, depending on how it's affected you. Next slide, Krista. So I want to talk about uncertainty and change. I don't know about you, but I like to have change every so often. So usually around every 3 months or so, I start to move things around in my house, rearrange the furniture. Drives people a little crazy that I live with, but I like change. I don't like things to stay the same. That's not necessarily the case for all of us. A lot of people don't like change because we're comfortable in our little pockets and the things that are routine for us. So the term change and stress are often synonymous of each other. They go hand in hand because it makes people anxious, nervous, unexpected. Typically, people really don't like change. So when you think about where we've come in the last year, and if you could all just reflect in your own minds, you know, when we went on lockdown, like what was that like for you? Like, how did people react to that? I know for me, it was stressful because I had to think about being in the house all the time. And I'm, you know, if you think I like to move around furniture, I like to move around too. So it was kind of stressful. So the change of that was very, had a big impact. So we're living in a world where we're constantly evolving and changing. And not only with COVID, but also other things like technology, how we communicate. I don't know, I think about, you know, being younger and having a day of rest, right? And now everything's 24/7. You have to respond to a text immediately, or you get anxious, or if someone sends you an email, oh, I didn't respond right away. So now we have to build back into our lives rest. We have to prioritize self-care. And we're going to talk about that over the next couple of weeks. So all of this on top of your own personal stressors. So your day-to-day, your work, your health, your relationships, it compounds stress and creates compression. So when we think about stress and managing it, it's important to understand what makes us stressed and where it comes from. And I think, you know, it goes without saying that COVID-19 and the pandemic has caused considerable stress for all of us. We either have had COVID, know someone who has COVID, have lost our jobs because of COVID. You know, all of us have been impacted in some way. Just, it's a continuum. The 24/7 on-demand rush lifestyle often leaves us exhausted, overwhelmed, and stressed. So that's why we're here today, and you're all engaging in this awesome workshop that we're participating in. So one of the things I just want to point out here, this is just of interest. Folks just focus on this graphic. On the left-hand side, you see in the 1900s, most of the things that people were dying from were acute diseases. So influenza, tuberculosis, you know, different types of gastrointestinal issues, heart disease. Those are acute illnesses. And now, you know, fast forward, and the right, it says 2014, but this hasn't changed at all over the last decade. We're looking at chronic disease as the leading cause of death in people globally. So diseases of the heart, cancer, chronic diseases that deteriorate the body. And what, on a medical model, what we're seeing is this is compounded by stress. Stress is a symptom of a lot of the things in our lives, and then we get sick. And I'm sure you've heard of like systems theory. So like a domino effect, you see dominoes and they all fall down. That's how our bodies work. So if one thing's not working right, you're going to feel it somewhere else. It's kind of like the concept of balance. I don't know if folks have heard the term, you have to have balance in your life. And I think it's impossible to have balance in every sector because you're going to be deficient somewhere. Somewhere there's going to be a deficiency. So this is just something to consider when you're thinking about this day and age and what people are sick from. So when we look at stress in its basic definition, and I want to just focus here for a second on, what does this textbook say? Like, what's the scientific definition of stress? And this is what it is. It's basically any change you encounter, wear and tear on your body over time, which is chronic stress, loss of emotional control, because our stress response triggers emotion. That we'll talk about that in a little bit. The absence of what we call inner peace, whatever that means for you. And I think the most important, the inability to cope with problems. This is resiliency. So Krista and I are going to talk about what is resiliency, why it's important, and why having a high resilient personality will help you manage your stress. And I think it goes without saying that all of us have experienced different types of stressors in our lives. It makes us resilient. Your lived experience is critically important to how you manage your stress. So we'll talk about that in a little bit too. And it's also your perceived threat. So my level of stress is going to be different from Miss Chambers' levels of stress, or Uncle Mike's level of stress, or Krista's level of stress. It's different because it's how we perceive it to be true. And the other thing that's important to consider in the biology of how brain development works, it's how you perceive your stress, whether it's real or not. So sometimes we worry, right? Worry and fear. You worry about things, probably 99% of the things we worry about never happen because it's an emotion, we're perceiving it to be true. So just some basic, baseline stress response. And this is really interesting to follow along. So when we were early incepted as human beings, the biggest thing we needed to do was not get eaten by a predator, right? So we were trying to get food and not get eaten by, I don't want to say a dinosaur, I don't know, something. So we have our primitive brain. Over centuries and centuries in technology development, industrial revolution, etc., the brain's stress response has stayed the same, but everything else has changed. So the threats are different, but the way our brain responds is the same. So your brain can't decipher if you're stressed. Has anyone ever been like in a fender bender, like it's been hit from behind in a car? And then you come to a stop sign and you get really anxious when you see someone come up behind you, that's a stress response. Your brain can't decipher the difference between that and being eaten by a tiger, because it sends stimulus to the brain and then we react that there's a threat happening. And then your central nervous system is activated. And the first thing that happens is your emotion centers are activated. So fear, anger, fight, flight, flee, or fawn is what we describe as a stress response. So some people will fight, some people will run, flight, some people will flee or get support, and some people will fawn, which is basically taking like the path of least resistance to be, a pacifist in the situation to manage the stress. So then your body stays activated till the threat is over. And then when it's done, you kind of feel better. What we're seeing now as both teachers, psychologists, counselors, and medical professionals is that people are largely staying activated in stage 3, which is this heightened state of stress. all the time. So your body isn't relaxing. It's not going back to baseline. Your baseline is now a state of active threat. So how do we deal with that? And what are some tools to help us cope with the stress that we're experiencing? And these are just some physical responses. So, and I think we've all been there. We all have different physical reactions to stress, as well as psychological responses to stress. So increased heart rate. That's why you have largely these chronic health related issues that are exacerbated by stress. If any of us have ever experienced health issues, what's one of the things that your doctor recommends? Manage your stress, manage your stress. That's a reason that happens. All right, what's next, Krista? All right, this is fun because there's different types of stress. And some people always think there's either, good and bad. And I don't like to say the words good or bad because I think there's positive and negative life experiences. And then there's trauma, okay? Sorry if you hear motorcycles in the background. My neighborhood. Okay, so there's 3 different types of stress. There's eustress, which is good stress, neutral stress, and distress, which obviously is negative stress. Neutral stress, and this is a newsflash to people, is your day-to-day default setting. So going to work every day, getting in your car, taking care of your families, taking care of your children. If you have a pet, you have responsibilities, or you're part of a group. It's the day-to-day stuff. That's the neutral stress that can wear people down. And I'm sure you've all heard of people having midlife crisis. Eustress or good stress is, you ever plan a vacation or are fortunate enough to go on vacation and you're planning it, and then you go on vacation and you're stressed the morning before, you can't sleep because you're about to fly. That's good stress. Or like a large family event sometimes can cause eustress, a wedding, some sort of, activity. And then obviously I think we all can relate to distress in our lives. So these are negative life experiences that occur over time that can be varying in degrees of severity. Okay, what's next? Okay, this is just a diagram of what I was talking about before. And I like to talk about, see, if we were in a class, I would do an activity with you with a pencil. This is real simple. So you take a pencil, right? What's the middle of the pencil is like a breaking point. So if I pushed really hard in the middle, what would happen? This pencil would break because of strain and stress I'm putting on. So much like the pencil, as people, we can break if there's constant chronic stress on ourselves all the time. So in this diagram, on the one end, you see poor performance. And then on the other end, there's poor performance and strain. In the middle is your maximum where you want to be, your baseline. So when you're experiencing either too much positivity, and that's really a thing, friends, chronic positivity is not good for you. Or on the other end, extreme distress, such as environmental factors, trauma, world events, natural disasters, etc., violence, addiction, etc. In the middle, you can break. So having moderate stress is where we want to be optimally. And yes, I said moderate stress, because stress can sometimes be a motivator. Some people, and I talked to my students and they said, well, why did you wait last minute to do this project? Oh, I get it done better when I'm under stress. Okay, whatever works for you. So beyond the optimal point is when you have distress. So you want to have good health, low illness, moderate stress. All right, what's next? And I want to talk about this, just hit on this for a few minutes, and I hope you're taking notes. The types of stressors in our lives. So there's 3 focal areas that cause stressors. There's the bioecological influences, psycho-interpersonal influences, and social influences. So what do they mean? So bioecological is just that. It's environment. So our home environment and also our literal environment. So for example, I'm sure you heard the car go by earlier. So for some people, we live in environments where it's loud or noisy or violent. We hear gunshots, etc. It has a lot to do. It affects our stress level. Okay. It matters. Your environment matters, or your internal environment. If you live somewhere where there's things going on environmentally in the home that cause stress. Psycho-interpersonal is all about relationships. So these are your relationships with family, friends, partners, coworkers, etc. And then lastly is social influences, is just that in terms of how we relate to people outside of our inner circles. When we talk to young people, and Krista more so than I with younger K through 12, social media causes a lot of stress. It's such an interesting phenomenon in that it's a constant, liking, looking, making sure that, you don't fall into this chasm of the internet where you're constantly on. Like, kids just don't get a break. So the types of stressors matter. And this is where you have to think of yourself or where you fall on the continuum. I would also put in here for biological or ecological, subjected to violence, racism, sexism, medical inequities, and other types of discriminatory practices that happen to people that cause stress in their lives. All right, what's the next slide? I can't remember. Krista, did you want to take this one, or you can't come off mute, you said? No, you can't. You can't. You can. Yeah, okay. Sorry, I'm chatting too much.
No problem. So some of the healthy stress management techniques that can be good or that you can implement into your daily routine are aromatherapy. So there's been a lot of research around aromatherapy and essential oils that they can decrease the perception of stress and decrease the levels of cortisol in the brain that are causing, cortisol, we call the stress hormone. It can lead to decreasing that. Lavender specifically is shown to reduce stress and anxiety, and chamomile is kind of like that domino effect, going back to that. It reduces stress and anxiety, and in turn, it can help you treat insomnia, because also when you're stressed, sometimes you can't sleep. And sleep is very important to regulating your body. Exercising regularly, adapting a healthy lifestyle, engaging socially with others, things to boost yourself, yoga, meditation, and we will go over that in the weeks to come, and avoiding stressors, meditation, saying no. A lot of people have a hard time saying no. I'm one of them. And then making times for yourself, things that you enjoy and things that can help you to relax.
That no one is such a challenge. Because we were grown in the culture of say yes to everything. Always put yourself out there. And that's not a bad thing. You should advocate for yourself, network, make yourself available. But it does promote burnout culture, to be quite honest with you. And I think we see that over and over and over again. And, the inability to say no can really be damaging, because it's kind of like, once something's in motion, it stays in motion. The theory, people are going to keep taking from your well if you keep giving them the bucket to scoop from it, right? So the boundary thing, as Krista said, is super critical tool, a difficult one to learn or unlearn, as I like to say, but it's important. And the other piece Krista talked about, self-care and relaxation. That's another whole, we could do a whole other lecture on that too, because I think the self-care movement, if you will, has really taken off, in my opinion, to be kind of a place of, if you don't, have good self-care or sleep or go to the spa or do this, then you're not doing self-care right. And I don't think that that's correct. I think your self-care should be whatever brings you joy, whatever refuels you and recharges you, so you can be a contributing member to society and to your family. So I think we have to rewrite that narrative. So holistic wellness kind of wraps up a lot of what Krista was saying before, and looking at the well-being piece, having emotional well-being, mental well-being. We have to talk more about mental health, mental well-being, and why it's important. And Krista and I aren't licensed practicing counselors. We have background to help in behavioral management, but we certainly know that this topic kind of crosses into those spaces. And we'll talk about the critical importance of speaking to professionals if you're struggling. Physical well-being, just moving your body every day is so important, and helps to reduce those cortisol levels Krista mentioned that happen in the body as a stress response. So, and when you are unusing that, so it's interesting. Exercise and stress trigger the same brain processes in the body. It's the same exact response, but the difference is the neurotransmitters that are created. Because when you have your stress response, it doesn't go anywhere and you just store it as fat. But when you're exercising, you kind of release it in a different way. And the last thing is really critically important is your spiritual well-being. However you design that in your life and prioritize, that is your journey. It's personal, your belief system, your fundamental core values as a person, and what that is for you, whether it's adapting to a specific religion or the spirituality of just being one with nature, or communing with friends, having fellowship is really important. So holistic wellness is all of those things, but it's also very individual. It's your journey and what works for you, which is really important. Okay. Ooh, we went right to 30 minutes. I love that. So now is kind of the part in the flow of how we're going to present. And some content may take less time, some content may take more time. It's really up to you. We want to have you think about a concept and write about it for a few minutes, and then we'll kind of come back and Krista and I will share our own experiences to kind of provide some context. And then if people want to share, we certainly welcome if you want to chat or unmute, being mindful of the time. How many people are in here now? I don't know. Oh, 16. Yes. So Krista, do you want to talk about journaling and what we're doing? We're going to try to do at the end of each session.
I think you summed it up, but we're going to do a journal entry, or I think we have like some personality quizzes just to tie into whatever information we're presenting. And then so as Mrs. Grant stated,
This is great.
to everybody's journey with stress is different. So really individualizing it as much as we can so you can understand the type of person you are, the type of things that might stress you out, the things that might guide you, and type of relaxation that you may need. And sometimes, talking about it or hearing others' experiences and knowing that other people are having the same kind of stressors as you have can be relaxing and can be comforting to know that, you're not alone in this.
That's so true. We talk all the time about this. And
Yeah.
it's helpful, you know, because you do sometimes feel like, oh my God, so stressful. And Krista and I are always on the same page, which is, it's just helpful when you can have relatability.
Well, I was going to say the way in which the pandemic has changed how I respond to stress is I talk more. I am open more to what is going on and letting people in more.
Interesting.
Yeah. So instead of keeping it all bottled up, because there's so many things with COVID, with work,
Mm-hmm.
with children, with school, it's just a lot. So talking about it helps me
Mm-hmm.
stay grounded.
Yes, it's so important. That's like the emptying process. So, you know, and sometimes it's like almost like venting, right? You just get it out or onto paper or to somebody else. And when you hear someone say, yeah, I totally get that. And I feel the same way. And you just start vibing off each other and talking about things more. It's amazing how that works. Trying to think, for me, the pandemic has changed the way I manage stress. To be like, my job has become super stressful with COVID because now I'm solely doing all COVID response work and on top of the regular job. So it's a lot. Krista knows I'm constantly working. So I think for me, it's having the ability to have the stop to do that self-care. It's kind of changed me to really prioritize different things. Relationships, time, your time. I think time is one of the most valuable commodities that any of us can have. And not with money or commerce, it's time. Your time is so valuable. And when your time is just drained by, you know, superfluous things or stressful situations or a job that you find stressful or toxic, it just causes a lot of strain. So with the pandemic forcing everybody inside, I remember in the beginning, I don't know if some of you can relate to this, but remember we were hearing all about, oh, I am since I'm inside, I'm going to have this whole other hobby or career. Like people are like making clothes and writing books and creating furniture from scratch or something. I'm like, oh my God. And then it's stress, right? To be like, wow, why don't I have a pandemic side hustle? So what's wrong with me? I'm just tired all the time. So then you feel guilty that you're not spending your indoor time doing something productive. And that's a whole thing. So I think it's giving yourself the permission to just do the things that bring you joy. And the things that bring you joy should be a priority for you. And the things that don't bring you joy, pass. Like I pass on those, hand them off. So I would ask if you have a piece of paper that you want to keep as a notebook or a journal as we kind of go along, consider the question, what are ways in which the pandemic has changed the way you manage and respond to stress? So take a few minutes to reflect on that, think about it. What does it mean for you? Has it become more stressful, less stressful? I also find for women, and this is just speaking for myself personally, I think it's been very stressful because, you know, where as a working woman, everything's kind of blurred together, school at home and kids and working from home. There's no boundaries anymore. So that's been very challenging to try to manage that. And I think the biggest thing, I mean, I'm grateful I have Krista because we're like sisters, you know, so we're very supportive of each other and there's just no questions, you know, find people in your tribe who don't question your, you know, what you need because they just know and are always there to support. Oh, here's someone in the chat. Mr. Chambers, I spend my time reading my Bible. Excellent. Excellent, Mr. C. Thank you for that comment. Yes. And every time you read it, do you find something new? I would venture to guess yes. I do when I read the Bible. If people want to chat in the comments and say what they would do, or if anyone is brave enough that they want to share, we could talk a little bit about what's coming up in the course, or any other comments at this time. What do you think, Krista?
Maybe we can talk about what's upcoming in the course.
Sure. Yes, always look for something to read or listen. Honestly, the reading, I agree with you, Jatin, Mr. Patel. Thank you so much for your comment. Always reading. You know, I do always have like 6 books on my nightstand. So I gotta read a little here, read a little there. I should really finish a book once in a while.
But it's that break that, reading is an escape, from what's
I
happening
know,
currently.
true. And most of the time I'm reading academic books, right, Krista? So having a good fiction read is like a joy. Like here's one book I'm reading right now, Clinician's Guide to Mindfulness. Krista and I are both reading this. It's full of sticky notes.
And that's what we're going to get into mindfulness too, as well. We'll touch on, focusing on the here and now. That should have been one of our healthy ways to manage stress. But yeah, focusing on the here and now and prioritizing what you can control and what you can't control, because that's where the stress is,
Yes. Very true. Present-minded thinking, Krista. Yeah. Comment in the chat, working from home means not dealing with road rage. Hello. Yes, I love that. When I'm in the car, my kids are always like, Mom, stop yelling at random strangers. So I totally can relate to that. Absolutely. Thank you for that comment. So in the next coming weeks, if you would like to be so inclined to come back, as Krista mentioned, we're going to be talking about resilience and emotions. What are the stress emotions? So really anger and fear are the main stress emotions, and why do we have them? Looking a little bit more into emotional intelligence. And Krista has some great content for EI and having a sense of awareness of your own emotional intelligence. Why is that important for stress management? Being empathetic towards others and having awareness, being able to think altruistically as opposed to very micro and internally. And just general coping skills. We're going to hopefully give you the tools and techniques. And some of you have mentioned them just here, like a good book, a great podcast. I don't know if folks listen to podcasts. I'm obsessed with podcasts. I listen to all different types all the time. Utilizing your coping mechanisms such as yoga, meditation. Krista mentioned some of these. Also prayer, forgiveness as a coping technique. It's a big one. And then when we get towards the end, we're going to talk a little bit about just some basic concepts of trauma and how it overlaces with stress management, why it's important to understand our trauma in relation to how we cope. And then finally, working towards a mindfulness plan for yourself. What do you need to build your own mindfulness plan? And here's a hint. I think it just needs to be whatever will work for you with what you have. I think it's important to understand within the wellness communities, there's a lot of people who are experts in wellness. And I think that it's just a matter of being a critical content viewer, understanding what you're looking at, how it relates to you in level of importance and priority, and how it resonates to your own lived experience. It's really, really important. Let's see, here's some more comments. I think when we delay or procrastinate, we set ourselves up for stress. Debbie, 100% agree. I always say preparedness is next to godliness and cleanliness. But when you're prepared, it's like a weight off your shoulder. So there was, my kids were really small. I tried really hard, Lord knows, to prep the day before school, like meals, clothes, have everything all ready. And when it came together, it was awesome. But when it didn't, it was like a crazy chaos in the morning. So I think, yes, and we try to teach children this, right? Always be prepared. Have your pencil, have your backpack, your paper, be prepared. What do you need to be successful? So setting yourself up for success is all about preparedness. I think delaying and procrastination are largely related to personality types. We'll talk a little bit about that as we kind of move along.
I was just going to say that because that's me, delaying and procrastinating.
No.
I think that also goes into, it's like everything is tied together. I think that goes into executive function skills, which is a whole other workshop, you know? So there's
Krista, what's executive functioning skills? Can you describe what that means?
So it's basically your ability to regulate yourself. There's working memory, inhibition, your ability to control and regulate yourself. But it's in your brain. So, and the good thing about it is it can be trained. So it is something that if you're not good at those skills, there are a bunch of activities that you can do to help yourself.
Love it.
Maybe we'll touch on that. And
yeah, that's good stuff. I always, for me to be able to be successful in work, I have to have a clear working space. So there's times when in my work, I have papers everywhere, notes, stickies, all sorts of stuff. And if it's too much, I feel like I'm getting lost in all the stuff. So I have to make sure I take time and prepare my space. So thanks, Debbie, for that comment. And Debbie also says, working from home can create a predisposition for delaying. Yes. Because when I'm home, I'm like, I think I'll watch the show. You know, you're tempted more. Or I'll go lay down for a few minutes, 30 minutes later or an hour later. There's a lot of distractions at home, for sure. I completely understand that. So much so, I would rather be in the office. When I need to be home, great, but I'd rather be in the office. It just helps me with the transition. Like, I know I'm going into the office, going into work. Now I'm leaving. Now I'm going home. That kind of speaks to what Krista was talking about with executive functioning, with transitions. I sometimes have a hard time with them. And Mr. C, failure to prepare is to prepare to fail. Write that somewhere. Write that down. But I also say this, and I'll stop at this unless there's more comments. Failure is a part of our cycle of life, and it's not a bad thing. I think we're conditioned to see failure as negative, right? And it's a fear. A lot of people are afraid to fail, afraid to fall. But, you know, we could go on and on about the impact of great leaders and, you know, people that have made a huge impact globally.
And, you know, failing builds your resilience.
Yes, exactly.
Correct. You have to fail to get to where you want to know, not that you have to, you know, some people are able to get it on the first go. But, you know, some aren't, and that's okay, because that kind of makes you kind of change your vision and see, you know, what you need to do to get to where you need to go. So it's not a bad thing.
It's not at all. And I think the more we can teach that, our children will grow without that sense of fear or failure, and it will help them be more resilient for sure. And as adults, we can unlearn. I said that in the beginning. I love unlearning. So that's amazing. Not commuting houses. No. Oh, I know. Yes, the real estate industry is a boom, or depending on what side you're on with that. Stressful, for sure.
Okay, we still am.
Well, I'm excited to be here to share information, and I hope that everyone is able to get some takeaways from the talk and the discussion.
I would like to say something.
Oh, sure, please do. Hello, Maggie.
Hello, how are you?
Welcome. Good. How are you?
I'm not too bad, thank you. I didn't want to say something, but I remember I always tell people, say something when you can, because you never know who's listening.
Oh, I love that. Yes.
One of the ways that the pandemic has really impacted me, it's the loss of close friends.
Mm.
And
Mhm.
I'm a two-time breast cancer survivor, and I've been through trauma and all of that.
Yes.
But with this pandemic and the loss of close friends, and it was something totally different.
Mm.
I have a therapist, a
Wonderful.
psychiatrist, and a psychologist. Thank
Wonderful.
God for them.
Yes.
But it was a different feeling, a different it's up in your head. As you talk about mental, that's one of the things that we have to really talk about, and sometimes we shy away from mental illness.
Mhm.
When what I was feeling, I couldn't describe it to my therapist, which before I can always describe things. But
Mm.
having lost somebody, one, two, three, and you don't really have time to grieve, it
Yes.
really can cause a different kind of stress. I don't know what category to put that one under, but for me,
Stress. Just
by the third one, I have to, as Crystal was saying, my brain, I had to put it on numb for a while in order for me to
disassociation.
function.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and at the same time, I'm helping other cancer survivors,
Wow.
looking for resources. So I had to be going from one to the next and switch and switch. And it really can take a toll on your body, you know. So I just decide, well, I'm just going to do the best I could. And then when I notice that I'm getting very irritable with people,
Mm.
and unnecessarily, sometimes I want to respond in not so nice way, but then the part of my brain set in and said, no, don't say that, at least you still have control over it. But
Mm.
this pandemic have been really, really
Mm.
hard and traumatic. And I'm glad that, you guys are talking about it, because a lot of people need to hear, and sometimes we're afraid to acknowledge how we are feeling
Mm.
because of what people are going to say. But not me. I'm just saying it as it is, because as Crystal said, you got to talk.
Yes.
If you don't talk and it bottle up inside of you, it will come out in other ways. And stress, I know for myself, it's not the cause of my second cancer, but it's a trigger. So I've been in the stress arena, and I have
Mm.
some idea of how the impact it can have on your mental, physical, emotional, sexual, your whole entire being.
Mm.
So thank you guys for what you're doing. It's much appreciated. And Mr. Chambers, thank you for inviting me.
Mm. Thank you for your insight and wisdom and your comments. Wonderful. Thank you, Maggie. And I agree. I think the connectedness really takes a toll on people. Human beings are not supposed to be alone. They're just not. So you're supposed to be communal and have people, a tribe, a group, something. So I concur. Thank you for that share is excellent. Grief is another big topic area. how we compound our grief, compartmentalize our grief, Maggie, as you said, you were doing just to get by, is that happens naturally. And as you said, you can't quite explain it. It's your brain protecting yourself from trauma. So thank you for that share. Connectedness is so important. And I'm hoping we're getting back to some connectedness. I find this as a way to connect, right? We're all here together. So I'm really looking forward to the next few weeks where we can kind of dig into some of these topics. And again, I hope everyone takes away something. I just want to reiterate, Mr. Chambers, this program is sponsored by the Cricket Hall of Fame and the West Indian Foundation in the city of Hartford. So thank you very much for that sponsorship. We're happy to be here representing those wonderful community institutions. And also for the mindfulness certificate, you'll have to attend 4 nights of this workshop. Recordings is happening, and I believe will be available online somewhere.